It feels like 10 years ago, people weren't going to cartoons, animes, or video games for fashion tips, but I feel like now in 2025, that tide has turned, and I personally think that is a good thing. With all of the popular animes that have been put out, I can't think of another one that's been as influential to pop culture as Akira has been. But I might be the wrong person to ask. There's just so much that it's offered us, from the iconic Akira slide to its general themes influencing other films, TV, and even music videos, to its fashion, and in part helping birth the genre of cyberpunk. And there's no doubt that it's had long-lasting effects on Western culture. When you watch the film, you quickly realize that the animators, and especially the writer and director Katsuhiro Otomo, cared about every aspect of this film, and that includes the clothing. It's a beautifully stylized landscape that pulled from the past, present, and future, which is what made it so iconic. But the question is it wearable? I think 100% yes, and I want to show the references that they pulled from, like Japanese biker gangs, and illustrate how stylish and based in reality this sci-fi film is, as well as show how it influenced a new subculture. Before we get into it, I apologize if I mispronounce anything. There are a lot of terms that are very new to me, so bear with me, but I try my best. This movie has a lot of moving parts to it, with rival biker gangs fighting each other, a fascist government actively fighting its citizens, and scientific experiments involving children with psychic abilities, possibly causing the destruction of Neo-Tokyo once more, and all of these elements influence the wardrobe accordingly. I was really impressed by the amount of care and detail they had for each character, no matter how big or small the role was, because even the characters passing by have memorable outfits, and I think a perfect example of this is actually the first character we see in the film. He wore a black crewneck sweatshirt with black cropped skinny jeans, strapped-like sandals, and accessorized with a pale red scarf and yellow sunglasses low on his face. The choice of silhouette is what sold me here, with the sweatshirt being oversized and absurdly voluminous on him, the sleeves being rolled up, and it being cropped. Meanwhile, the jeans were drastically skinny, giving this outfit a juxtaposition. Normally, I would hate seeing cropped skinny jeans, but for whatever reason, on this outfit, it just worked. The accessories finished off the outfit with the scarf tied in front, hanging off of his shoulders, almost looking like a hood layered underneath his crew neck, and the choice of colors popped really well against the black outfit. I also love how they refused to follow the rule of not mixing blacks and browns with the all black outfit and then those brown shoes. In the grand scheme of things, this guy did not need to have such a striking outfit, but he did, and that's why I appreciated it so much. And this was a theme for all the characters, even the background characters, with each outfit looking distinct and stylish from one another. And not only were these scenes detailed with all of these different outfits, but the clothes themselves were detailed as well. Otomo has said that he meticulously considers why and how everything in reality is there, and when he creates his illustrations, he does the same thing. He wants everything to feel authentic and organic rather than something that's artificial. Otomo's attention to detail was seen in things like the after-dinner split on pants, which was prevalent during the early 20th century, as well as the buckle or cinch backs that originated in workwear like Levi's jeans, but were reimagined for biker pants in Akira. It's really cool to see these things in an anime because it's pulled from fashion history and reinvented to create something new, and it shows the thought and research that went into each detail, which added to the overall visual appearance or visual landscape, and also serves as great inspiration. But where exactly was Otomo pulling these inspirations from? Throughout the film, there is an obvious Western influence, whether that be garments like the raglan sleeve bomber jackets or baseball hats, to the early 20th century details I mentioned before. But he was also influenced by American films that had a great impact on him. Outfits like this guy's double-breasted suit, fedora, and brown gloves, which looks both menacing as well as classic, reminds me of the outfits in the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, which was very influential to Otomo. When you compare the two, it's hard to deny the influence that Bonnie and Clyde had on characters like this. Otomo's influences didn't stop there though. He was also influenced by many different subcultures, a lot of them being popular in Japan at the time of the 80s when the film was being made. You'll see girls influenced by classic 80s trends with workout accessories, bright colors, suspenders, and printed clothes like Kaori shorts. You also notice some punks in the film, like a street punk with dyed spiky hair, and a New York punk that looks like he could have been pulled from the Ramones. And there was also this use of the prep subculture with polos and short-sleeve button-downs with slacks that was seen throughout the film and even on some of our main characters that we'll get into later. Now, one of the biggest subcultures or styles in the film is something called shibukaji or Shibuya style, which is a form of dressing where you mix and match different brands and aesthetics or subcultures. Before Shibukaji, it was understood that if you wore something like Prep, you would only wear Prep, or if you wore a brand like Big John, you would strictly wear that brand. There was no really mixing and matching of pieces or aesthetics. But during the 80s, Shibukaji became popular and people started to take pieces from different subcultures and mix them together and create new outfits. And this may seem obvious now because that's essentially what a lot of people do nowadays. But at the time of the 80s in Japan, this was very uncommon and people just kind of stuck to one style and stuck to one subculture and only wore that. There was never really any style blending or mixing. What's funny about these characters wearing Shibukaji or Shibuya style is that Shibuya style was originated and popularized by old money wealthy teenagers, whereas in Akira you have protesters, bikers, and the proletariat layering button-ups with sweatshirts and wearing baseball hats, slacks with sneakers, military garments with Prep, and so on. The use of Shibukaji was really smart here because it kind of flipped it on its head and challenged who was able to wear it while also looking good on screen. One thing you'll notice in Japan and about Japanese people is that they're almost scientific when it comes to getting dressed. They are very in tune with fashion and are able to blend styles and pieces to create outfits that nobody else really would have thought of. And I think Otomo was able to capture that really well in Akira. Now, to focus on the biker games of the film, they were influenced by the subcultures that I mentioned before, but the main driving force that influenced these characters and these people were the Japanese Bosozoku of the 70s and 80s. Bosozoku are the real Japanese biker gangs that influenced and inspired many of the elements of the capsules and clowns, which included the clothing. These groups were started shortly after World War II with kamikaze pilots feeling a sense of angst and were having a hard time adjusting to a post-war Japan and looking for an adrenaline rush that was similar to the ones that they had as pilots. These gangs, which were referred to as the Bosozoku, gained prominence during the 70s, which is where they dressed closer to greasers. And depending on who you ask, it was either American greaser-centered films like A Wild One that were smuggled into Japan after the war, or as people like Ikichi Ozawa, the singer of the band Carol, as stated by W. David Marks in his book Amatora. And it's in the 70s where you have this more greaser aesthetic, where you see leather jackets, workwear like denim, or work pants, and also leather boots like engineer boots. But during the 80s, they ditched the AmeriCorps or Yankee clothing like it was called in Japan and started wearing what was called tokofuku, which meant attack clothing and usually consisted of a boiler suit, often seen in construction jobs, and was reminiscent of the kamikaze pilot uniforms. Over these suits were often a long military-like overcoat that was worn with a tasuki or a sash in a figure 8 position to pull back the sleeves as they were riding. And for footwear, these guys usually either wore really high engineer type boots or tabby boots, and then accessorized with headbands, armbands, and surgical masks, with everything from their clothing to their bikes to their accessories being covered in right-wing imagery like the rising sun or Nazi regalia. And much like the Bosozoku, graphics were an important and essential part to the bikers in Akira, but rather than having right-wing imagery and slogans, they had painted faces on helmets and faces, smiley face sweatshirts, images of Mount Fuji, and of course capsules, all of which made their outfits a lot more visually appealing. But I'm a sucker for graphics, so I might be biased here. And this didn't stop at the biker gangs. Other characters wore graphics as well, like fake baseball teams, graphic sweatshirts, as well as hats. Early on in the film, you even see this guy wearing this slouchy, dusty yellow sweatshirt with the word Young written on it. And what's interesting about this outfit specifically is that it's actually a reference to Young Jump magazine, which originally was putting out the Akira manga, which I think is a really cool Easter egg for the people that are like in the know. That Young outfit, or that Young sweatshirt outfit, is another great example of Shibukaji style. I love it. I felt like a lot of the graphics looked almost vintage-like, with the smiley faces and the collegiate-like writing on sweatshirts, and whether that be intentional or not, but it makes me want to pull more obscure graphic t-shirts and more specifically sweatshirts for my wardrobe. Pivoting from graphics, I loved the way that they interpreted the Bosozoku, where we see characters have futuristic surgical masks, short sleeve boiler suits layered underneath sleeveless sweatshirts, as well as these tall buckle boots. One of the guys even had a vest that was very similar to the way that the Bosozoku wrapped their torsos when riding sometimes. These two bikers were some of my favorite interpretations of the Bosozoku, from their color scheme to the choice of garments like military coats, similar to the actual gangs, but in this instance worn with Western sleeve garters instead of tasukis, to the use of graphics like the sleeveless sweatshirt with that bold red cross on it, and then the accessories like the military helmet and cocaine white riding gloves. Some of the influences were definitely more on the nose, especially the guy with the overcoat, but it was all a home run for me between the colors, the layering, the choice of silhouettes, and I actually think these guys are a great example of how this film, in part, helped birth cyberpunk fashion and the culture. It's important to note that a lot of biker gear ends up being common within the cyberpunk culture, whether it be leather gloves, jackets, tall engineer boots or buckle boots or anything like that. And what you see here is some of that mixed in with Japanese culture and then set in the near future where all of it feels ahead of our time. But I mentioned layering before, and I want to go back to it and highlight the unique ways they layered from sweatshirts underneath sleeveless shirts to button-ups, under short sleeve and long sleeve sweaters. And these were all deliberate style choices that made the outfits a lot more interesting. And I really enjoyed seeing the different ways that Otomo wanted to have these guys be layering. There's even a background character who wears a tank top over their shirt, which is something I swear I have seen Japanese brands do. I just can't think of the one that did it. I do know Hiroki Nakamura, the owner of Visvum, has layered t-shirts underneath sleeveless Visvum sweatshirts, which looks very similar to some of the biker gangs in the film, which makes sense because he is very much so into motorcycle culture and possibly influenced by Akira, who knows? Some of the layering choices in the film I have done before, but the other ones I haven't, I'm very excited to try to play around with, just not right now because New York is just getting out of a heat wave, so I will not be layering for the near future. I also mentioned the surgical masks before, which I want to get into the accessories of these biker gangs. A lot of it came down to practicality, but stylized. The leather gloves were long and flared out. The goggles either harkened back to vintage biker goggles or felt futuristic with their color and design. And the helmets reminded me of World War II helmets, which added in this militaristic undertone as well. There were also numerous bandanas and scarves in a plethora of colors covering their faces, and even though it was practical, it was also a great addition to the outfits. Also, shout out to the one character wearing a visor. I never thought in my entire life I would see a visor in an outfit and think it looked good, but it did. And more on the use of color, if you haven't noticed already, part of what made all of these outfits stand out so much is the color matching or styling. They were so particular when it came to the color of these outfits, which helped give them a uniqueness, and it was fantastic and inspiring, with there being like 327 different colors for this film, 50 of them being brand new, specifically being made for Akira, which is just mind-blowing. After prepping for this video, it's definitely made me want to experiment with colors a lot more in my wardrobe. I don't know how much color I'll be adding into my pants collection, but who knows? There is something to be said about going out of your comfort zone, so maybe eventually. A lot of the colors that I gravitated towards were very muted, dull, or even like dusty looking, and almost resembled natural dyes. And one of the first brands that I thought of that are able to replicate these types of colors is actually Visvum. Although their prices might not be in your price range, because they are certainly not in mine, they have so many colors that feel like they were pulled straight from Akira. And I know Visvum used to be really into natural dyeing. I don't know so much anymore, but I think natural dyes and sudden fading is a great way to replicate some of these colors that you see in Akira. But that's not to say that there aren't other brands at a more affordable price range that are putting out pieces with colors like these. It's just you have to search for them. Now, like I mentioned before, these biker gangs weren't just influenced by the Bosozoku. We saw elements of workwear in the clowns with overalls and workwear vests, as well as outfits that felt inspired by the early 20th century with the clown leader and his muddy yellow pinstripe biker pants with purple suspenders. His overall look almost felt vaudeville inspired with the paint, clothes, the shoes. Vaudeville was a genre of entertainment in the US during the early 20th century that featured burlesque dancers, jugglers, clowns, comedians, and when comparing posters and images of vaudeville shows to the clowns, you can see the similarities, which I find to be really interesting and cool. When thinking about a sci-fi anime, you wouldn't really think about vaudeville inspiring or influencing these characters, but I think that's where the genius comes into play. Meanwhile, the Capsules had this look that consisted of biker, prep, IV, military, and this sci-fi or cyberpunk aesthetic. One of the styles that seemed prevalent within the Capsules that I mentioned before is Prep and Ivy. And one of the most known outfits in this film is the iconic pink polo outfit that Kaneda wears, which felt like something you could have found in an 80s dorm room. The pink polo was somewhat oversized, styled with the collar popped up, and paired with some slim beige khakis with a singular pocket, another style detail that harkens back to early 20th century suiting. And he finishes off the look with these white sneakers. People interested in menswear and mainstream hip hop will know this outfit either consciously or subconsciously because of a certain famous rapper that shall not be named. When thinking about American Prep, this is probably what you're thinking of. The pastel colors, the popped collars, the simplicity to it, which is fine. Personally for me, I like the abstract take on Prep's older cousin, New Ivy, which a lot of the Capsule members had. For a little bit of a backstory, during the early 80s, Prep was starting to die out, and Ivy was starting to come back into the fold, but this time it was different from the 60s. Japan had a reputation of putting their own spin on Ivy and brought in their own individuality to the subculture, and it was reflected with the Capsules. You have broad blazers with t-shirts, voluminous v-neck sweaters with dyed shaved heads, green button-ups and red ties paired with pleated trousers and saddle shoes, all combined with jackets that looked inspired by military bombers. And with all of this combined, these outfits look something in between a Japanese Prep, New Ivy, and Shibukaji style, which helped give these characters a wide range of looks and made this group of bikers look very diverse. Although the Bosozoku, Ivy, and Prep did play a pretty big role for these characters, I think the more impactful aesthetic was the sci-fi or pre-cyberpunk look. I touched on it a little bit before, but cyberpunk as it stands today is in part influenced because of the sci-fi aesthetic that was seen in Akira and especially in some of the Capsule members. For instance, throughout the film, there was this representation of ripped and tattered clothing, which was seen on biker gangs and protesters and was used as a way of conveying this dystopian world and state that they were living in. Yamagata, one of the Capsules, felt like had this dystopian take on Shibukaji where he layered ripped up button-ups and sweatshirts together and paired it with gray biker pants tucked into some black biker boots. The ripped up clothing felt both like a style choice and a reflection of the world he was living in. While cyberpunk doesn't need to have ripped up clothing, these elements are seen often within the subculture thanks to films like Akira. Another character that attributed to this genre was Tetsuro, with his color palette being almost monochromatic with these different shades of grays and whites, with the occasional navy or brown coming into play. His color palette, more specifically the monochromatic outfits, reminded me almost of astronaut spacesuits with the all white or silver color, all the details that are featured on them. And maybe it's just me, but I don't think it's outlandish to see a correlation between a sci-fi anime and space travel. So I just find there to be a connection between the two. The Gray Harrington style jacket he's seen in at the end of the film almost felt inspired by James Dean from Rebel Without a Cause. From the cut of the jacket to the way that it's styled on him with the collar popped up and the sleeves rolled up, but it felt elevated to be in the future, going back to that idea of greasers being updated to match their surroundings. And then of course there's his anorak jacket, which had this exaggerated cut, somewhat oversized with it cinched in at the waist, giving this interesting silhouette where it billows out. And it had details like the side slit, zippered chest pocket, and articulated hood. And although these details aren't futuristic, when it all comes together, there is something about it that feels slightly futuristic. It feels something akin to what a brand like Acronym would wear, except this time it's in all gray. With that in mind, pieces like ponchos, anorak jackets, and the likes are all seen within the cyberpunk genre. Even when they stripped his outfits down to just tank tops, slim biker pants featuring paneling and knee padding, and his boots from ones that were inspired by World War I officer boots to buckle boots, these outfits still felt in line with the cyberpunk genre. Side note, whenever I saw the buckle boots on screen, my brain melted at how good they looked, and it's a silhouette that's kind of been seen in cyberpunk since this film. Now, although the red cape was impractical, it did look great, but I don't know how wearable it is. It does look good. I just don't know how I could implement something like that in my wardrobe other than maybe getting a poncho. Lastly, for Tetsuro, even though it's not an actual piece of clothing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention his bionic arm that he has towards the end of the film because A, it's an example of this sci-fi cyberpunk look and this idea of high-tech low life, and B, it just looks cool and adds to the overall aesthetic. Lastly, of course, we're going to talk about Kaneda and his outfit that has been cosplayed and copied countless times before. His look was all red everything. The biker pants, Mandarin collared shirt, and of course, the biker jacket. Like Tetsuro, the pants featured padded knees, seam detailing, his even featured a cinch back, And like most of the biker pants, they were in a slim fit tucked into his red boots. One thing that I really haven't mentioned yet is that although the film was heavily inspired or influenced by Western culture, there were Eastern garments and Eastern culture that was influencing it as well. Whether it be something more traditional like the tabi shoes, kashimos, or haoris, to a more modern iteration like these Mandarin collared shirts, which are now a common theme within cyberpunk fashion, thanks to characters like Kaneda, Tetsuro, and some others. And personally, I love Mandarin collared shirts in general, whether it be more cyberpunk looking ones or just like flannels or button-up shirts like this. Kaneda also has a great dingy white t-shirt in a perfect fit. It's cropped yet can still be tucked in, perfect sleeve length, barely drop shoulders, but still boxy on him. I like how the t-shirt broke up the all-red outfit towards the end of the film, keeping his outfit from being one note. I also loved how the battery packs almost acted as accessories like suspenders, and it was a nice little detail for such a simple outfit. Now the piece that probably everybody's been wanting me to just get to and talk about, which is the iconic red jacket, and I don't think I'm breaking new ground by saying this thing is something else. It's like a varsity or bomber jacket that has had this total makeover with the ribbed paneling, off-centered clasp closures, the high collar with this buckle clasp, and the capsule graphic on the back. Its shape is what I find to be really mesmerizing. It is slightly oversized, but more so than that, it's very voluminous, making him appear bigger than he really is. And I love that there's so much going on with this jacket, but it doesn't feel like too much. All of the elements play off of each other really well. The more that I look at it, the more that it feels like this crossover between a bomber jacket, racer jacket, and a fireman's jacket, where they took all of the best attributes of each jacket and just made it into one masterpiece. All I have to say is that if you find a jacket like this, you need to take it and run no matter the price. I will say that I have never seen a replica that looks as good as it does in the film, and there are reasons for that, like being able to just illustrate something looking good versus actually making something that looks good. But because of that, if you're not buying the jacket or you don't want the jacket for cosplay or costume reasons, I would say try to emulate the jacket instead of buy a replica of it, because it's just not gonna hit the same. Because of films like Akira, cyberpunk fashion features clothes like cropped jackets, Mandarin collared shirts, biker gear. When comparing modern day cyberpunk fashion to Akira, you can still see the influences even after 30 years of this genre evolving. What I find so impressive is that Otomo used all of these different subcultures, decades of fashion and ideas for the future, and combined it to create this fresh and innovative wardrobe while still being grounded to reality. Although Akira is considered to be a cyberpunk forefather, I think there are so many outfits and details that are wearable for anybody because it was pulled from what was happening in Japan during the 80s. And I like to add that even with the cyberpunk outfits, there are so many different elements and pieces and looks in general that you can pull from for your own wardrobe, even if the cyberpunk genre isn't your thing. Well, that is going to conclude this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you have made it this far, please like the video and let me know what aspect of the wardrobe that you loved the most in Akira. And if you have a favorite piece, let me know as well. Follow me on all my socials. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Letterboxd, where I post more fashion and costume design content. It's all linked down below, as well as all of the articles that I read to prep myself for this video. That is going to be it for me. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.